Shalom and welcome back to Israel with Aline. We are here in Jerusalem and we are going to explore together here on the Mount of Olives, the church of the Pater Noster, the place where Jesus taught the Lord's Prayer to his disciples, and also hear it in its original language in Hebrew. And we're also going to use this video to share a big announcement with you here on the channel. So, if you're ready, let's get started. What's the big news? We are launching the first Israel Caravan with Aline, which will take place in September 2022. You will get the information about the caravan at the end of this video and also on our website. But now let's walk together to the Church of the Our Father. On the Mount of Olives, many biblical events took place, but it was not considered part of Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. Why? Because it was outside the wall. Literally, the name tells us the Mount of Olives. It was an open hill with many olive trees, agriculture, and also with a cemetery. And Jesus chose to come to the Mount of Olives precisely because of its biblical importance, but also because it was a quiet and secluded place where he could be with his disciples and apostles without all the confusion that was always inside Jerusalem. The church, which is also known as Pater Noster, is one of the 4 oldest churches in the Holy Land. It was built in the year 326, which means less than 100 years after the events of Jesus at this place. But it would be destroyed in the year 614 during the Persian invasion and later rebuilt by the Crusaders, and destroyed once again in the year 1187 and abandoned and forgotten until the year 1910 when it was rediscovered. And then it was decided to rebuild the church, which is the one we are going to visit today. We continue on the Mount of Olives, and we know that Jesus used to come here to pray with his disciples according to these passages. And during the day, he taught in the temple, and at night he would leave and stay on the Mount of Olives. And leaving, he went, as he usually did, to the Mount of Olives. And his disciples also followed him. So the Bible tells us that Jesus would come to the Mount of Olives, and he also taught his disciples here. And this is also reinforced by the fact that since the 4th century, this church was known as the Church of the Disciples. And also by a pilgrim who came here in the year 333, that is, 300 years after the crucifixion. And he tells us about the church that existed here since his travel diary has survived to this day. And also in the apocryphal book called the Acts of John, it is written that Jesus used to come and teach in a cave on the Mount of Olives. Let's go down now to the cave and better understand the connection of this place with the Lord's Prayer. Look at this cave. It's not very big and it's quite simple, but it's so important because of the stories that happened here. And I find it very interesting to think that Jesus, when he chooses the places to perform his miracles and also to give his sermons and teachings, he often chooses simple places. And in nature, for example, the Sermon on the Mount also took place on a mountain in an open area. And here we see this grotto, so simple. You can see that a good part of the grotto is not original, because in 1910, when it was rediscovered, archaeological excavations began, but unfortunately, due to a lack of knowledge and proper techniques, part of the grotto collapsed during these excavations. So that part in the back that we see is the most original part that remains of this grotto. The Lord's Prayer was taught by Jesus to his disciples when they asked Jesus to teach them how to pray. And it was taught by Jesus more than once. We have accounts in two Gospels, in Luke and in Matthew. The oral tradition that you saw, which is a very old tradition, says that one of the times Jesus taught the Our Father was here in this grotto that we just visited. And because of the importance of this prayer, it has been translated into practically every language in the world. And here we see these panels that are in the church. They are the Our Father in its different languages. Here there are 143 different languages of the Our Father. And of course, now we're going to look for the version in Portuguese. Here is the Portuguese, but you can see that it's different from what we're used to nowadays, because here it's archaic Portuguese. We are now entering the central part of the church. And you can see here in the background that it was rebuilt in the same style as the Crusader church that used to be here. And you can see that it is relatively simple, without many decorations. And right here on the side, there is something that, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful things in the church. Not because of its appearance, but because of its meaning. You can see that here we have the Our Father in different languages, but in Braille. I mean, so that blind people who also visit the church can read it in their own languages. We saw the archaic Portuguese, but a few years ago, another version in Portuguese was added here in the church, a little smaller, but it's Brazilian Portuguese. Let's take a look at it here. Let's also seek prayer now. The text was written in its original languages, which are Hebrew and Aramaic. Both languages were spoken here in Israel in the time of Jesus. Aramaic was the everyday language spoken by the people, and Hebrew was the language of prayer. Here behind me, you can see the text in both languages. And I want you to look at them side by side so you can see how similar the languages are. And that's why at that time many people spoke both Hebrew and Aramaic, and we know that Jesus was familiar with both languages. And now it's time to listen to the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew with subtitles in Hebrew. And now, let's go back to the viewpoint on the Mount of Olives and talk a little about the very special caravan that we are preparing for you. Let's go.